Recently, my family and I went on a trip to Orlando, Florida, where we visited several Universal and Disney theme parks. My wife is one of those unfortunate people who get motion sick on theme park rides, which then spoils the whole experience, not only for her, but also for the rest of the family, since we either spend our time apart doing different things, or feeling really bad for her, as she feels so miserable after going on rides. Enter the Relief Band. It promises fast-acting and long-lasting nausea relief, and is even FDA cleared. According to their marketing material, the Relief Band works by sending highly specific electrical impulses through your body's nervous system, stimulating the area of your brain that then stops you from getting sick. Sounds too good to be true, I know. But my wife was willing to give it a try because everything we've tried in the past, like motion sickness pills and whatnot, has not worked for her. And no, this video is not sponsored. We bought the Relief Band with our own money. I just want to make sure that's clear. On our first day at Universal Islands of Adventure, we went on the Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey ride, and my wife wanted to try going on the ride without using the Relief Band to see how she would feel. And getting off the ride, she nearly collapsed as she was feeling so sick she was about to throw up. We then put the Relief Band on her, turned it on, and literally within a minute, her nausea was gone. She said she still felt a little disoriented, but she was able to stand and walk just fine, and most importantly, she no longer felt like she was going to puke, which was amazing. Those who experience motion sickness, you know that feeling can sometimes take hours to pass, so feeling better almost immediately is pretty miraculous. Well, that isn't all. There's more to this story. We went on this trip with my aunt and uncle, and my aunt also gets motion sick. Not to the extent my wife does, but there are rides she avoids because she feels ill after riding them. We then let her try the Relief Band, and again, like magic, she was able to go on rides that made her sick just a week or two before without any issue whatsoever. With my wife and my aunt now as proof the Relief Band works, I wanted to give it a try in virtual reality. On their website, Relief Band claims it works for all kinds of motion sickness, including gaming. Now, just like sailors on ships can get their sea legs, it is also possible to get your VR legs, which is something I did years ago when I first started playing VR. Like many other people, when I first started using VR, anytime I'd use smooth motion to move around in games, it would make me feel sick. But slowly over time, as I kept using VR and used smooth motion for increasingly longer periods of time, I got used to the artificial locomotion and no longer get sick from it. That is until the PlayStation VR 2 came out. There was one game in particular on the PlayStation VR 2 I could only play for 10 or 20 minutes tops before I felt like I was going to hurl. That game was Kayak VR. The motion of the water moving you up and down, combined with smoothly moving through the environment, turned out to be more than my stomach could take. This wasn't the only game on the PSVR 2 that made me feel motion sick, though. It was the one that made me feel the worst the fastest, but every game I played on the PSVR 2 after playing 30 minutes to an hour, I would have a little bit of a headache come on, and I would feel a little ill. At that time, I went to Twitter and posted about my experience, and thanks to some of my followers, I learned about something called frame persistence, and how a longer frame persistence has been known since the early days of VR to make people feel motion sick. Now, to make a long story short, I learned you can turn the brightness of the PSVR 2 down, which decreases the headset's frame persistence, making gaming in the headset more comfortable. I did make a video about this, talking about it in depth, which you can check out in the cards, and I've also linked it in the video description if you'd like to learn more. I mention this because this is how I plan to put the Relief Band to the test. I wanted to put myself in a situation where I knew I would encounter VR sickness, and Kayak VR on the PSVR 2 I knew would do the trick because I haven't played it at all since the first time I tried it. When I fired it up to do this test, the PS5 literally showed I'd only played that game for a total of 36 minutes. I also set the brightness of the PSVR 2 to 100% to maximize the frame persistence, because if anything is going to make me sick in VR, this scenario is most definitely going to do it. It took me a little bit to figure out the proper placement of the relief band on my wrist, but once I was feeling the tingling in my palm, I jumped into Kayak VR, where I spent over an hour floating through canyons, racing through the Arctic ice, and finally batting this inflatable turtle along out to the open ocean. And not once during that time did I feel sick or nauseous. So referring back to the title of the video, does the relief band actually work? It certainly seems to. Granted, I do have a pretty small sample size of only 3 people to go off of, but a 100% success rate among us is pretty encouraging. The last thing I want to talk about before ending this video is the one thing about the relief band I do not like, and I think really needs to be fixed, and that is the charging cord. The product itself is great. At least it worked great for my wife, my aunt, and I, but whoever decided to include a 6-inch charging cord needs to be dragged out into the streets and publicly shamed, because this thing is stupid. They really should include at least a 3-foot long cord like every other electronic device does. In order to charge it, you have to hang the band from a charging adapter, which they do not include with the band, by the way, and then plug it in like this. That is, unless you have an electrical outlet that's close enough to a countertop or some other surface you can set the band on without putting any stress on the connection. The charging cable connects to the relief band magnetically, which is pretty cool, but the magnets are too weak in my opinion, and it comes detached way too easily. So you can't really just let it dangle, as it's most likely going to disconnect and then not charge. To end the video on a positive note though, once the battery is charged up all the way, it does last for a very long time. According to their operating instructions, depending on the model you have and the power level you use, the battery can last between 18 and 30 hours on a full charge. While at Disney and Universal, we were at the parks for a good 12 hours each day, and it ran all day long, no problem. We did, of course, charge it up at our hotel each night, so it would be ready to go the next day. But yeah, we never had our relief band run out of battery. Now, I can hear you saying that's great and all, it works for you guys, but the relief bands are expensive. Yes, they are. We bought the Relief Band Sport on sale for $200, but on Relief Band's website, they're normally $250 US. So yeah, I don't know that it's going to be worth buying one strictly to help with VR sickness. If you're someone who gets motion sick riding in the backseat of a car or on an airplane or gets seasick easily though, then I think purchasing one of these begins to make a lot more sense, especially if you're doing those kinds of activities on a regular basis. But knowing it is a viable option to help with VR sickness is useful information in my opinion, since I devote a lot of time to VR here on my channel. And for my wife, who gets very sick on theme park rides, to her, the money spent was well worth it, because she was able to go on all the rides she wanted to without feeling sick, and we were able to have an enjoyable family vacation together. And you know, you just can't put a price on that. Come on, do it. You know you want to. Subscribe.